In a silent parking lot, a little girl wandered among empty cars. Her bare feet raw, her dress torn, clutching a worn, stuffed rabbit. Invisible to the world and afraid, she faced the night alone, until a millionaire CEO saw her. With a single act of compassion, a story began that neither would ever forget. The city lights of Houston shimmered far below, little more than reflections in the rain-slicked windows of Franklin Plaza Tower. It was past midnight. Up on the executive floor, the world had long since slipped into silence, a kind of hush that pressed in on Nathan Hayes as he walked the corridor for what felt like the 1,000th time that week. Behind the glass doors, the boardroom was empty, the air still charged with the ghosts of arguments and deals closed. Nathan's steps echoed down to the elevator, the weight of exhaustion settling in his shoulders, his tie loosened and shirt collar open, but there was nothing relaxed about him. He made his way to the underground garage, the click of his Italian shoes swallowed by the endless polished concrete. The hush down here was heavier, almost physical. He paused beside his black Bentley, unlocking it with a flick of his wrist. For a long moment, Nathan simply sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, eyes unfocused as the dashboard lit up around him. He thumbed through his phone, notifications blinking from partners in Tokyo, board members in New York, texts from his assistant Maggie about tomorrow's conference call. He scrolled past them all, searching his contacts for something, someone else. Nothing, just business. Nathan stared at the screen, feeling the old ache return. Another $1 million deal, and I'm still driving home alone. He closed his eyes, head leaning back against the seat. Outside, the rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the windshield. He should have felt relief, or maybe a slice of pride. Another quarterly record broken. A new wing of Franklin Plaza under construction. His name in the Wall Street Journal. But the silence inside the car wasn't peace. It was just a reminder of how hollow everything had become. He had a house on the lake waiting outside the city, an escape built for nights exactly like this. But lately, even that place felt empty. He reached for the ignition, the Bentley's engine coming to life in a purr. His hand hovered over the gear shift, mind already on the dark highway winding away from the city. That's when he heard it. A small, muffled sound. Barely there. Nathan's body tensed. He listened. There it was again, this time unmistakable, a child's whimper bouncing off the concrete pillars. He froze, old instincts kicking in. He'd grown up in neighborhoods where you never ignored a sound like that. He stepped out of the car, the chill of the garage suddenly sharper against his skin. For a moment, the world was so quiet he thought he'd imagined it. Then came the softest sniffle, echoing from the far corner near the emergency stairwell. Nathan moved in that direction, his footsteps careful, deliberate. As he drew closer, he saw her, a little girl, no more than 6, crouched behind a concrete column, arms wrapped around her knees, bare feet pressed to the cold floor. Her yellow dress was ripped at the hem and smeared with grime, her legs and arms marked by fresh bruises. A battered cloth rabbit was clutched so tightly to her chest, its fabric seemed almost fused to her fingers. Nathan's heart twisted painfully. His breath caught, a sudden flash of heat and anger tightening his chest. Old memories he'd spent years burying. She didn't look up as he approached, just trembled, trying to make herself as small as possible. He crouched down, keeping his voice gentle. "Hey, sweetheart, are you hurt?" At first, she didn't answer, only squeezed the rabbit tighter. Nathan saw the fear on her face, a purpling bruise along her cheekbone, dirt smudged under her eyes. He felt something surge up inside him, fierce and protective, ancient as love. He reached out, but didn't touch her. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. What's your name?" The girl flinched, her voice barely a whisper. "Please. I'll do anything you say. Just don't send me back there." Nathan's jaw clenched. He recognized the terror in her eyes, the kind that didn't come from one bad night, but from a life spent learning not to trust anyone. He took off his coat, moving slowly so he wouldn't scare her, and draped it over her thin shoulders. "Hey, you don't have to be afraid anymore," he said quietly. "I'm here now, and I won't let anyone hurt you." The girl finally looked up, her eyes, wide, blue-gray, and desperate, locked with his. For a second, Nathan forgot the rest of the world even existed. The empty house on the lake, the city lights, the deadlines. All of it faded. Here was someone even more lost than he was. "What's your name?" he asked again. She hesitated, lips trembling. "Sadie." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "That's a pretty name. I'm Nathan." She watched him, waiting for some kind of punishment, for yelling or anger. When none came, her posture softened just a little. Nathan saw the cloth rabbit in her lap, its ear torn, its eyes faded from love. He could smell whiskey and cigarette smoke clinging to her dress. Not hers, he realized, but someone else's. Someone who should have protected her and didn't. Nathan didn't ask any more questions. He could see enough. He reached out his hand, offering it to her. "Come on, Sadie. Let's get you somewhere warm." She stared at his hand, then at his face, as if weighing the risk. Finally, she placed her tiny fingers in his palm. He stood, lifting her into his arms. She weighed nothing, as light as a memory. Nathan walked with her toward the private elevator reserved for penthouse residents, his coat wrapped around her like a shield. She rested, her head against his shoulder, body trembling with each breath. He felt the fierce urge to protect her, to erase every bad memory someone else had given her. As the elevator doors closed, Nathan glanced once more at the empty garage and his waiting car. For the first time in years, he didn't care about getting away. He'd planned to drive to his lakeside retreat, but tonight he knew he was exactly where he needed to be. Sadie didn't say another word. She just held on, rabbit pressed between them, trusting him with the last bit of hope she had left. Nathan pressed the button for the top floor, heart pounding, not just from fear or adrenaline, but from the unshakable sense that his whole life was about to change. The elevator glided soundlessly to the top floor, opening into Nathan's penthouse with its sweeping floor-to-ceiling windows and stark modern lines. The city sprawled below in a patchwork of lights, but inside, everything felt cold, almost clinical, a museum of a life too busy for comfort. Nathan stepped inside, cradling Sadie, his shoes muffled against the thick Persian rug. The double doors clicked shut behind them, sealing off the world. He hesitated by the entryway, uncertain. How do you welcome a scared child into a place built for solitude, not sanctuary? Nathan tried to remember the last time anyone had visited, much less spent the night. He settled Sadie onto the edge of the sofa, soft gray leather that swallowed her tiny frame. She sat motionless, the yellow dress now nearly hidden beneath his coat, rabbit pressed tight to her chest. Her feet dangled above the floor, toes still dirty, a small island of vulnerability in a sea of glass and chrome. "Are you hungry?" Nathan asked gently, searching her face for any sign. No response. Just eyes that darted to every shadow, every sudden noise. The city was a distant hush, but the silence in here felt heavier, more absolute. Nathan's own discomfort prickled at him. He, who negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without blinking, now found himself paralyzed by the presence of a child. He fumbled in the kitchen, pouring milk into a mug and dropping it into the microwave. The hum seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet. He tried to find a blanket, but realized every throw in the house was either cashmere or far too large, impractical for a child. He grabbed one anyway, draping it clumsily over Sadie's shoulders, only to see it nearly swallow her whole. Returning with a mug of warm milk, he crouched beside her. "I made you something to drink. It's not perfect, but it's warm." His attempt at a smile felt awkward. She glanced at the cup, but didn't reach for it. Her arms curled tighter around the rabbit, her chin disappearing behind it. Nathan watched her, realizing how completely she had withdrawn, like a small animal waiting for the world to go quiet again. He sank onto the floor beside the coffee table, sitting cross-legged to make himself less imposing. "This place, it's a little big for just me. I guess I never thought I'd need a smaller one," he said quietly, not expecting an answer. He tried a light laugh, but it died quickly in the air. Sadie stared straight ahead, shoulders hunched, lips pressed tight. Nathan tried again, telling her about the view from the windows, about how the city looked like a sea of stars at night. He talked about nothing in particular, how the elevator sometimes made a funny sound, how the old heating system clanked when the wind picked up. He hoped his words might fill the space enough to coax her out of her shell, but she only shrank further inward. He was about to give up, frustration gnawing at him, when Sadie shifted. Without a word, she slowly reached out and placed her cloth rabbit on the table between them. It was frayed and stained, one ear hanging by a thread. The stitching faded from years of love and worry. Nathan froze. He understood instantly what this meant. For a child with nothing, this was not a gift, but an act of utter trust, the bravest thing she could offer. He picked up the rabbit with both hands, careful as if handling fragile glass. He met her eyes. "Is this your friend?" She nodded just once, almost imperceptibly. "He looks like he's been through a lot," Nathan said softly. "Kind of like you, huh?" He gave the rabbit a little squeeze, then set it back down so she could reclaim it. He didn't miss the flicker of relief in her eyes. Inside, his heart turned over. How can someone so small trust me this much? The question stung in ways Nathan hadn't expected. He remembered his own childhood, foster homes, strangers, a system that saw him as a case, not a kid. No one had ever trusted him, not really. Now this little girl, with bruises on her arms and a voice that barely whispered, was handing him everything she had. He cleared his throat, swallowing emotion. "You're with me now, Sadie. No one will hurt you again." The words came out rough but steady, and for a moment, he thought she might believe them. As she drank, Nathan noticed how her breathing slowed. The tightness in her shoulders eased. She still didn't speak, but something subtle had shifted. The wall between them, once ironclad, was starting to thin. Later, as the city lights faded and the clock crept toward dawn, Nathan spread another blanket on the sofa. He watched as Sadie curled up, rabbit in hand, her body making itself as small as possible. He sat in the nearby armchair, determined to stay within her sight until she slept. She watched him for a long moment, uncertain. Then, in a tiny voice, she whispered, "You won't let him find me?" Nathan shook his head gently. "Not a chance." Satisfied, Sadie finally closed her eyes, surrendering to sleep for the first time in what felt like forever. Nathan sat there in the half-dark, the city quiet beneath them, thinking about promises, how easy they were to break, how hard they were to keep, and how desperately he wanted for once in his life to get it right. Morning brought a thin wash of gray light to the penthouse, but it couldn't soften the heaviness that hung over everything. Nathan stood by the window, watching rain streak down the glass, the city below waking up to another busy day. But here the air was still, suspended, like the hush that comes after a storm, but before anyone knows what damage was done. Behind him, Sadie slept, curled on the sofa, rabbit pressed under her chin, as if clinging to a lifeline. Nathan's jacket had slipped off during the night, now pooled on the floor, one sleeve trailing like a hand reaching for help. Nathan had barely slept. He checked his phone, messages from the board, urgent requests from investors, reminders for meetings he'd already decided to miss. He ignored them all. Instead, he called Maggie Rivera, his right hand for a decade, but also, more importantly, a former social worker. Maggie's voice, crisp and unflappable, was a lifeline he didn't know he needed. He kept it brief. "I need help, Maggie. Can you come?" By the time Maggie arrived, Sadie was awake but silent, eyes wary. Maggie moved with gentle confidence. She knelt beside Sadie, offering her a mug of warm apple juice, her tone low and unthreatening. "I like your bunny," Maggie said, smiling at the faded, battered rabbit. "What's his name?" Sadie hesitated, then whispered, "Oscar." It was the first time Nathan had heard her say more than a single sentence. As Maggie began to work her quiet magic, Nathan retreated to the kitchen, listening to the gentle ebb and flow of Maggie's questions. She never pushed. She told stories about her own favorite stuffed animal as a child, how she'd once gotten lost in a big department store, and how scared she'd been. Bit by bit, Sadie let slip pieces of her world. It wasn't just that her stepfather, Rick Dalton, drank too much. It was the way the glass bottles clinked at midnight, the sharp stink of whiskey that filled the apartment, the flicker of blue TV light painting Rick's angry face in the dark. Sadie described hiding in the closet, counting the seconds between raised voices and slammed doors. She spoke of her mother, Carla, who sometimes whispered to her at night, "Hide if anything happens, baby. Don't make a sound." Maggie listened without flinching, but Nathan, in the kitchen, felt his hands curl into fists. Maggie noticed a hospital wristband on Sadie's arm. She pointed to it gently, asking, "Did someone take you to the hospital?" Sadie nodded, but wouldn't say who. There were bruises, some yellowing with age, others new and angry, a constellation of hurt scattered across her arms and legs. Nathan's anger burned low and fierce, a heat he hadn't felt since his own childhood. He remembered cold social services, waiting rooms, board staff, paperwork, and endless, hollow promises. He'd seen what happened to kids who slipped through the cracks. When Maggie broached the subject of calling child, "Protective services?" Nathan stiffened. The words hung between them, sharp and dangerous. He pulled Maggie aside, voice low. "No, not yet. She stays here with us, at least until we know what we're dealing with." Maggie studied his face, recognizing the fear behind his determination. She nodded, but reminded him, "We have to do what's best for her, Nathan, no matter how hard it is." The next hours blurred into a slow rhythm of small, hard-won victories. Sadie ate a bowl of cereal, her eyes never leaving Nathan as he moved about the kitchen. She drew a picture at the table, 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a big yellow house. Nathan recognized Sadie and her mother instantly, but the third figure, tall and broad-shouldered, was drawn in soft pencil, as if she wasn't sure he belonged there. Sadie quickly hid the drawing under a book, cheeks coloring with embarrassment. Maggie spent the afternoon combing through the little evidence they had. She called nearby hospitals and shelters, describing Carla as best as she could, and even drove to the old apartment complex Sadie mentioned. The manager there was evasive but eventually admitted there had been trouble a few nights ago. Screaming, a broken lamp, police cars. Carla, he said, hadn't been seen since. Nathan searched for Rick Dalton online, turning up a mugshot, court records for domestic violence, and a string of short-lived jobs. A deep sense of dread gnawed at him. He thought of Sadie, so small and silent, trusting him with her whole heart and nothing else. How many times had the system failed a kid like her? By late afternoon, Nathan and Maggie sat together, trading notes. They found more fragments. A hidden phone in Sadie's coat pocket, filled with desperate, unsent messages from Carla. "He's getting worse. I'm scared. If anything happens, find Sadie, please." Each text read like a last will and testament. Nathan's determination solidified into steel. "She stays here. We keep her safe." That night, as the penthouse lights dimmed and the world outside spun on, Sadie curled up on the couch, Oscar Bunny clutched to her chest. Nathan sat nearby, reading emails he had no intention of answering. He listened to the quiet, to the way the city seemed to pause, to the tiny sounds of Sadie breathing, alive and safe. Maggie left just after midnight, promising to come back first thing in the morning. Nathan sat with Sadie until her eyes finally closed. He watched her sleep, thinking of promises, of all the ones that had been broken for him, and of the one he'd made to her. "You're safe here. I won't let anyone harm you ever again." He meant it with everything he had. For the first time in years, Nathan didn't feel alone. He felt afraid, yes, but he also felt hope, fragile and fierce, for both of them. The city outside Nathan's penthouse glistened in the blue haze of dusk, but inside, the air was taut, pulled tight by a fear neither Nathan nor Sadie could quite name. Days had passed in a fragile new routine. Maggie came by every morning, bringing laughter and gentle encouragement, but there was always a sense of waiting, as if a storm were building just beyond the glass. Sadie clung to Nathan in small ways, following him from room to room, shrinking at unexpected noises, starting awake at shadows. Nathan found himself changing too. The cold edges of his life, the perfectly arranged furniture, the spotless counters, the sterile hush, were slowly giving way to evidence of her. A pink sock left on the rug, a rabbit propped on the windowsill, a crayon drawing taped to the fridge. Each was a sign that the world he'd built alone was being gently invaded by something messy and alive. But every comfort was undercut by a tension that refused to fade. Rick Dalton's name loomed like a curse. Maggie's contacts in social services reported he'd been seen around Franklin Plaza, asking questions, angry and drunk. Nathan doubled building security, installed new cameras in the lobby and garage, and gave the front desk staff explicit instructions. If Rick showed up, no one was to let him near Sadie under any circumstances. One evening, the tension broke. Nathan was in a board meeting, one of those high-stakes sessions where numbers and egos sparred across the table, when his phone vibrated. It was Maggie. Her message was just 3 words: "You need home." Nathan glanced at the time, the faces around the table, then stood abruptly. "Family emergency. Handle this without me." He walked out, leaving a room full of stunned executives in his wake. He raced home, the elevator seeming to crawl floor by floor. When the doors finally opened, he heard Sadie's voice, thin, terrified, crying his name. He found her in the hallway, curled in a ball by her bedroom door, breath coming in panicked sobs. Maggie knelt beside her, trying to soothe her, but only Nathan's presence seemed to make any difference. Nathan dropped to his knees, gathering Sadie into his arms. She clung to him, small fists twisting the fabric of his shirt, her whole body trembling. "He's outside, I saw him," she gasped. Her fear was a living thing, wild and contagious. Nathan held her tight, murmuring soft promises. "I'm here. I'm not leaving. He can't get to you. I swear it." That night, Nathan didn't just leave the hallway light on. He made a nest of pillows and blankets in the living room, just outside Sadie's bedroom. He sat in an old leather armchair, reading aloud from a book he found tucked away in his childhood box. Stories of far-off places and brave, lost children who always found their way home. Sadie didn't say much, but she listened, eyes wide and shining in the soft glow. Each time she started to doze, she would glance toward Nathan, making sure he was still there. When the hours stretched into early morning, Sadie finally fell asleep, her small hand curled around Nathan's fingers. He stayed awake, listening to her breath, feeling the steady weight of her trust settle in his bones. In the quiet, he made a promise to himself as much as to her. Nothing, no business meeting, no fear, would ever come before her safety again. The next day brought a new threat. Rick Dalton, desperate and wild-eyed, tried to force his way into Franklin Plaza. Security called the police, and Rick was turned away, but not before he shouted threats for the whole lobby to hear. "She's mine. You can't keep her from me." Nathan watched the surveillance feed, his jaw clenched in rage. He could see the barely contained violence in Rick's eyes, the kind of anger that didn't end with words. Nathan knew then, this was more than a bad family story. It was a war. He upgraded security again, hired a private firm to monitor all entrances, and even arranged for an off-duty police officer to stay close during the nights. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. Sadie felt it too. She jumped at every buzzer, every distant shout in the hallway. At night, the old nightmares returned, her voice calling out for Nathan, begging him not to leave. More than once, he abandoned conference calls, slipped away from important dinners, simply to sit beside her bed until the panic faded. Maggie watched him with quiet approval, seeing the way his world was shifting, his priorities rewriting themselves one sleepless night at a time. One afternoon, Nathan found Sadie standing by the window, watching rain slide down the glass. "Are you scared too?" she asked, her voice so small he almost didn't hear it. Nathan knelt beside her, looking out at the gray city. "Yeah," he admitted, "but being scared just means you have something worth protecting." Sadie seemed to think about this for a long moment. She took his hand and squeezed it, as if making her own promise in return. That night, Nathan read to her again, not leaving until he was sure she was asleep, her hand still resting in his. When he finally closed his own eyes, he thought not of the danger that stalked them, but of the fragile, extraordinary trust that had grown between them. A trust he would never, ever betray. The rhythm of Nathan's penthouse had begun to shift, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Where once everything was steel and silence, signs of a new life emerged. Sadie's crayon drawings bloomed on the refrigerator, bright arcs of color breaking up the sterile gray. A pink blanket, brought home by Maggie, was now draped over the back of the sofa, occasionally abandoned in a sleepy bundle after cartoons. Laughter, soft at first, then freer, echoed through the halls, chasing away the old hush like sunlight through fog. Nathan felt the change in himself too. He no longer checked his phone the moment he woke up. He found himself brewing cocoa instead of coffee, learning to appreciate the sticky fingerprints on the kitchen counter. Work emails piled up unanswered. For the first time in years, he didn't care. Each morning, he watched Sadie, small but determined, try to braid her own hair, tongue poking out in concentration. She looked up at him sometimes, as if unsure he was real, and every time, Nathan reassured her with a gentle smile. He wondered if she knew she was changing him as much as he was changing her. But beneath this fragile happiness, the question of Carla, Sadie's mother, hung in the air. Nathan and Maggie worked quietly and tirelessly, calling shelters, scanning missing persons bulletins, following every vague lead. The search was slow and uncertain, a constant reminder that not every story found a happy ending. It was Maggie who broke through. After a long morning of phone calls and delicate negotiations, she found a name at a women's shelter in Montrose. Carla Lynn. No last name, just Lynn, but the description matched. A woman in her early 30s, dark hair, signs of recent injury, accompanied by a nurse when she arrived. Maggie hung up and turned to Nathan, hope shining in her eyes for the first time in days. Nathan was nervous as he drove to the shelter, Sadie in the back seat with Oscar Bunny clutched close. He worried what reunion would look like, if Carla would even want to see him, or if Sadie's presence would reopen wounds too fresh to heal. But when they entered the shelter, Carla's reaction made everything else disappear. Carla saw her daughter and ran, her face a storm of joy and heartbreak. She dropped to her knees, arms open, and Sadie collided with her, sobbing, the two of them clutching each other in a wordless tangle of relief. Carla apologized over and over, her voice hoarse, eyes red. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry I left you. I tried to get away. I tried so hard." Sadie just buried her face in her mother's shoulder, as if afraid she might vanish if she let go. Nathan stepped back, giving them space, but Carla looked up at him with gratitude and a quiet, unspoken plea. Maggie introduced him gently, and Carla, trembling, thanked him for saving her little girl. Nathan shook his head. "She saved me too," he admitted softly. With Maggie's help, Nathan arranged for Carla to see a doctor and a trauma counselor. There were bruises, old and new, and a haunted look in her eyes that would take more than a few nights of safety to erase. But in that moment, seeing her daughter alive and well, something fragile inside her seemed to mend. Nathan insisted that Carla and Sadie come back to the penthouse, at least until they could find somewhere safe. That night, for the first time, the dining table was set for 3. Nathan cooked a simple dinner, grilled cheese and soup, clumsy but made with effort. He watched Carla and Sadie laugh quietly over spilled juice, their faces softening as the evening wore on. It was a kind of peace Nathan had never known, not the hollow quiet of his lake house, but a living, breathing warmth that filled every corner of the home. After dinner, Sadie drew another picture. This time she drew 3 people, herself, her mother, and Nathan, all holding hands in front of a house with yellow windows. The word home was written in big, shaky letters above the door. Nathan found himself staring at it long after Sadie had gone to bed, overwhelmed by the thought that maybe, just maybe, he was becoming someone's family for the first time. Later, as Carla tucked Sadie in, she lingered at the doorway, watching her daughter sleep. Nathan saw the exhaustion and relief mingling on her face. She whispered to him, "I didn't think anyone would help us. Not really. Thank you." Nathan simply shook his head. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together now." As the city hummed below, Nathan looked around his transformed penthouse. The laughter, the drawings, the evidence of life where there was once only silence. He realized the peace he'd always chased, out at his lake house, had never come from solitude. It was here, in the tangled mess of new beginnings, in the love of a child, in the hope of a mother who refused to give up. That night, as he listened to Carla humming quietly in the next room, Nathan felt the truth settle over him, a truth that felt both terrifying and wonderful. He wasn't alone anymore, and for the first time, he didn't want to be. The first morning, Carla and Sadie woke under Nathan's roof. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows, as if the city itself was exhaling after a long night. But the peace was brittle. Every laugh at breakfast, every crayon masterpiece on the fridge, every moment of new hope was underscored by an awareness that Rick Dalton was still out there. Nathan knew it, Carla felt it, and Sadie, though she tried to hide it, still flinched at loud noises and kept Oscar Bunny close, even in sleep. Nathan turned the penthouse into a fortress. New locks, security cameras everywhere, and a private security team stationed in the building. But safety wasn't just about steel and glass. It was about promises, a promise Nathan made every time Sadie reached for his hand and asked if he'd be there in the morning. He swore he would. He meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. But Rick was growing more desperate. There were calls at odd hours, voicemails filled with threats and slurred accusations. He was seen prowling around the plaza, leaving notes at the front desk, circling the building in a rusted sedan with the engine running. Nathan's team kept Carla and Sadie inside as much as possible, but the pressure was suffocating. Maggie, ever resourceful, coordinated with the police and child services, quietly building a case. Still, Nathan slept with one eye open, phone on his chest. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The penthouse was quiet. Carla was in the kitchen with Maggie talking about schools and new beginnings, while Sadie sat cross-legged on the rug, drawing a picture of her new room, yellow walls and glowing stars. Nathan was on a business call when he noticed the cameras flash red on his security monitor. The lobby feed showed Rick, wild-eyed and soaked to the skin, pushing past the front desk and shoving a security guard. He was screaming Sadie's name. Nathan barely had time to think. He ran to Sadie, scooping her up, as Maggie ushered Carla to the safe room Nathan had installed weeks earlier. Alarms blared. Rick burst from the elevator, rage twisting his face. Security tackled him just feet from Sadie, pinning him to the marble floor as he clawed at the air, shrieking about his family and what was stolen. Carla, behind the safety door, sobbed in relief as Maggie comforted her, and Nathan shielded Sadie's face, whispering, "It's over. He can't hurt you now." The police arrived within minutes. Rick was arrested on charges of trespassing, assault, and child endangerment. But Nathan knew this wasn't enough. He pressed charges, determined to see justice through. Maggie compiled all the evidence: security footage, medical records, police reports, and most damning, Carla's testimony. The case moved quickly. For the first time, Nathan was grateful for his influence. The system moved for those who pushed, and Nathan was relentless. The day of the trial was cold and clear. The courthouse was a cavern of marble and echoing footsteps. Nathan walked in with Carla and Sadie at his side, their heads held high but hands trembling. Inside, the gallery was filled with lawyers, officers, and strangers, but all Nathan could see was the little girl at his side, her fingers gripping his. The trial was wrenching. Carla testified first, voice steady despite the tears. She spoke of the years of threats, the violence, her desperate attempts to protect Sadie. Doctors described the bruises and fear that lingered long after the wounds healed. Rick, unshaven and defiant, denied everything, but the evidence was overwhelming. Then Sadie was called. Nathan sat with her outside the courtroom, bending down to her level. "You don't have to do this alone," he told her. "I'll be right there. Just tell the truth. That's all anyone can ask." Sadie nodded, chin trembling. On the stand, her voice barely carried at first, but when she glanced at Nathan, his steady presence gave her courage. She told the truth, the yelling, the hiding, the fear, and the hope she'd felt when someone finally kept a promise. After hours that felt like a lifetime, the judge spoke the words everyone had waited for. Rick Dalton was guilty, child abuse, endangerment, and assault. The sentence was firm. He would not see freedom for a very long time. Carla wept quietly in Nathan's arms. Sadie, exhausted, leaned into Nathan's side, the tension leaving her body in slow, shuddering waves. Outside the courthouse, with reporters swarming and the sky threatening rain, Nathan found a quiet bench on the steps. He sat with Sadie, watching people hurry by, the world suddenly feeling new and uncertain. Sadie was quiet, the weight of it all finally settling in. She looked up at him, eyes tired but hopeful. "Are you still my hero, even when I'm scared?" Nathan squeezed her hand, voice soft but certain. "Especially then." In that moment, the courthouse and the world faded away. There was only Nathan, Sadie, and a future that, at last, looked brighter than the past. With Rick finally behind bars and justice served, Nathan realized what real safety felt like. Not just locks or bodyguards, but the knowledge that love, honesty, and second chances could build walls stronger than any stone. The quiet after Rick's trial was different from all the silences before. This one was soft, full of possibility. For the first time, Nathan's penthouse felt less like a sanctuary under siege and more like a place where real life could begin. But Nathan knew healing wouldn't come overnight. Wounds that deep, on a child, on a mother, even on himself, didn't close just because a judge said it was safe to move on. The first true step was leaving the city. A week after the verdict, Nathan loaded Carla and Sadie into his car and drove out past the city limits, toward the tranquil stretch of lakefront he'd once called a lonely escape. This time, it felt like a promise. The house itself was nothing extravagant. White siding, a porch overlooking the water, wide sunlit rooms that echoed with emptiness, just waiting to be filled. It was the kind of place where you could build memories, not just hide from storms. Sadie ran barefoot across the grass the moment they arrived, Oscar Bunny flying at her side. Nathan and Carla trailed behind, letting her laughter pull them forward. Together, they set about making the place their own. Nathan and Carla painted Sadie's bedroom a bright, hopeful yellow. Sadie insisted on glow-in-the-dark stars for the ceiling, a universe to watch over her while she slept. Each star they stuck was a tiny victory, a sign that she was finally safe enough to dream. Nathan, changed by everything that happened, knew the story couldn't end with just their little family. He established the Sunflower Foundation, named for Sadie's favorite flower, to support children and mothers escaping abuse. He poured his own resources into it, determined that no child would be left as invisible as Sadie once was. Maggie, who had become more than just an assistant through all the chaos, accepted his invitation to serve as director. With her experience and heart, the foundation began to grow almost overnight. Calls and letters poured in, and for the first time, Nathan felt he was building something that mattered, something bigger than profits and towers. But healing wasn't always smooth. Sadie started school for the first time in her life. The first day was bright and terrifying. Nathan watched from the car as she disappeared into the building, her backpack nearly as big as she was. That afternoon, the school nurse called. Sadie was panicking, breath coming too fast, unable to speak. Nathan dropped everything and sped to the school, arriving in record time. He found her in the nurse's office, knees hugged to her chest, eyes darting to every corner. He knelt down and simply held her, whispering, "I'm here. You're okay now. I'm not going anywhere." The nurse watched them, quietly remarking, "She's lucky to have someone who comes running." Nightmares still lingered, sometimes waking Sadie in the small hours. Carla would sing quietly, stroking Sadie's hair until she slept. Nathan took to reading stories in the yellow-painted room, sometimes tripping over the big words on purpose to make Sadie giggle. It was during one of these evenings that the change snuck up on them. Nathan stumbled through a tongue twister. Sadie burst out laughing, and without thinking, said, "Dad, you read that wrong." The room went silent. Sadie didn't seem to notice what she'd said, but Nathan did. He froze, emotion catching him off guard. Carla, watching from the doorway, smiled through happy tears. Nathan swallowed, blinking hard. The word echoed in his mind. Dad. A name he'd never believed he'd earn. For the first time in his life, he felt whole. The new routine took hold. Weekends spent at the park, picnics by the lake, afternoons filled with the kind of laughter that had once felt impossible. Sadie's confidence bloomed with the wildflowers by the water. She started to invite friends from school, drawing chalk suns on the porch, running barefoot in the grass until dusk. One sunny afternoon, all three of them, Nathan, Carla, and Sadie, spent the day at a sprawling city park. Sadie ran ahead, spinning in circles, her hair a halo in the sunlight. Old fears, which had once wrapped themselves so tightly around her heart, seemed to unravel with every step. Carla and Nathan watched from a picnic blanket, sharing quiet, grateful looks. It wasn't lost on Nathan how fragile this all was, how easily it could have been taken away. But now, in the gentle warmth of the sun, with Carla's hand in his and Sadie's laughter in the air, he let himself believe in forever. That night, Sadie fell asleep for the first time in her own bed, beneath the glow of her chosen stars. Nathan closed her door, pausing to look at the room. The sun-yellow walls, the pile of storybooks, the gentle breathing of a child who finally felt at home. Downstairs, he sat beside Carla on the porch, watching the reflection of moonlight on the water, listening to the peaceful silence of a family that had fought its way back from the edge. He knew then that healing didn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing bad had happened. It meant building something stronger out of all the broken pieces. It meant coming when called, even in the darkest night. And it meant accepting, finally, that he was no longer alone. Summer arrived at the lake house quietly, with warm breezes rolling off the water and sunlight dappling the porch in golden pools. The days unfolded gently, so different from the wary, shadowed mornings that had marked Sadie's first weeks with Nathan. In the new season, the world seemed to expand, windows flung open, laughter drifting through sunlit rooms, and every surface gradually filling with signs of life. Beach towels on the railings, school art projects on the fridge, the slow accumulation of memories that belonged to no one but them. On a Saturday morning, the house hummed with small rituals. Nathan stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes with a competence born from practice, humming along to an old country song. Carla, wrapped in a soft robe, sipped coffee by the window and watched Sadie dance barefoot across the porch, her new yellow dress twirling in the breeze. Oscar Bunny, freshly laundered but still a little threadbare, peeked from the crook of her arm, never far from her side. Sadie's laughter seemed to vibrate through the whole house. It was a sound Nathan had learned to cherish, the proof of everything they'd survived. She spun across the wooden planks, sunlight catching her hair, arms outstretched like she might take flight. The dress she wore was the same shade of gold as the one from that terrible night in the garage, but this one was new, bright, clean, and made for dancing, not for hiding. Nathan caught Carla's gaze through the window, and for a heartbeat all the struggles and wounds and sleepless nights were replaced by simple gratitude. Later that day, the three of them drove into town for a picnic by the water. It was the annual Sunflower Foundation Family Day, a tradition that Nathan and Maggie had started only months before, but already it felt like it had always belonged to the community. Dozens of children and parents from all backgrounds gathered on the grass, laughter and music spilling over the lake. Maggie, clipboard in hand, organized games and gave hugs to every child who wanted one. She and Nathan watched as kids painted their faces, chased bubbles, and dared to believe in brighter futures. Carla helped Sadie set up a lemonade stand, more a table with a handwritten sign and a pitcher of melting ice than a business. But Sadie poured each cup like she was serving royalty. Nathan bought the first glass, grinning as Sadie insisted on exact change only. When a shy little girl from the shelter hesitated nearby, Sadie waved her over, offering a cup and a smile so genuine it made the girl's mother cry. The afternoon blurred into evening. There were speeches, short, honest words from parents and children who had found hope through the foundation. Nathan took the mic only briefly. "We're not just survivors," he said, voice catching. "We're a family now. Every child deserves to feel safe, to be loved, to dream as big as they want. We started this foundation because of one brave little girl, but we continue it for all of you." When the sun began to set, the families gathered by the water's edge. Maggie handed Sadie a candle, its flame tiny but steady. Together with Nathan and Carla, she walked to the center of the crowd. As the sky faded to pink, Sadie placed the candle on a floating raft with dozens of others, little lights drifting out onto the lake, a promise that darkness would never win again. Back at home, the porch was washed in moonlight. Carla sat on the steps, watching Sadie trace patterns in the air with a sparkler, her face illuminated by pure, innocent joy. Nathan joined her, slipping an arm around her shoulders. They watched as Sadie, still in her yellow dress, spun slow circles, her bare feet padding softly against the wood. Carla leaned into Nathan, voice low and full of awe. "See, you brought color back into her life." Nathan shook his head, smile tender and a little amazed. "No, she brought color back to mine." Inside, Sadie's latest drawing had been framed and hung in the living room, no longer hidden but proudly displayed. It showed three figures holding hands under a bright, impossibly golden sun. In the center was Oscar Bunny, now drawn as large as the people, and above them, Sadie had written in bold, hopeful letters, "Home, safe, loved, forever." The closing of the day was simple but monumental. Nathan tucked Sadie into bed, kissed her forehead, and listened as she whispered, "Good night, Dad. Love you." Carla joined them, sitting on the edge of the bed, her presence warm and solid. Sadie's eyes fluttered shut, her breath soft and peaceful. No trace of fear, just the safety of belonging. Downstairs, Nathan paused to look at the drawing on the wall, the echo of Sadie's laughter still ringing through the house. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be needed, and to need in return. This house, once a refuge for one, had become a home for three. As night deepened over the lake, the home was filled not with silence, but with a gentle, healing kind of noise, the sound of a family, at last, unbroken. If this story touched your heart, even just a little, we invite you to stay with us. Because here at Restoring Tales, every story reminds us that love, kindness, and second chances still exist. There are more tales waiting, of resilience, of hope, and of quiet heroes among us. So, if you believe in the healing power of love and the beauty of life's small moments, be sure to subscribe to Restoring Tales and turn on notifications, because the next story might be the one your heart's been waiting for. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.